Hello, Mr. Morrissey. Welcome to the A-List. I'm having you here today because you are a famous columnist at the Chicago Sun-Times. How did you get to this position?
Well, kind of a long journey, actually. I could probably go all the way back to grade school. I decided I wanted to be a writer. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I always kind of had it in the back of my mind that that's what I wanted to do. And so I got to high school. I went to Fenwick High School in Oak Park and joined the newspaper staff and did that. And studied journalism at Northwestern University, which has a great journalism program. And kind of went through it. And I reached a point at Northwestern where I really wasn't quite sure that newspapers were exactly what I wanted to do. And then a friend of mine called me after I'd graduated and said there's a job opening at this small paper in the south suburbs called Star Publications. I said, oh, well, I'll give it a try. And I was a news side writer for about 6 months in the south suburbs, and there was an opening in sports. And I thought, well, why not? You know, I really like sports. I played sports growing up. And so that was kind of the beginning for me. I realized that one, I like sports, and two, sports lends itself, I think, to the best writing in the newspaper because there's just great stories to tell, not just from the games where they're exciting and winners and losers, but just good feature stories. So I started there. I went to Fort Wayne, Indiana for about 3 years. I was actually a copy editor there, editing other people's stories, and then covered minor league hockey. I went to Charlotte, North Carolina for about a year. And then I went to Denver. I was there for 10 years. Yeah. I covered the Denver Broncos for eight seasons. And that was really interesting and a lot of competition because there was another newspaper. I always wanted to get back to Chicago. I kept trying over the years and no one would hire me. I kept applying to both newspapers here. And then in 1997, the Tribune called me. Okay. And asked me if I wanted to come and cover Northwestern football. And so that's how I ended up back in Chicago. And then I became a columnist in 2000. And then as fate would have it, or I don't know what you would call it, 3 days ago, I was hired by the Sun-Times. They had been pursuing me for about 3 weeks. And so a little strange now after 12 years being in a different paper, but that's sort of the condensed version of how I got here.
Yeah. Well, you seem to say you did a lot of writing almost only in newspapers, correct?
Really, that's about all I've done, yeah.
So when most kids, I think, I don't know, but when I wanted to be a writer when I was younger, but I wanted to write like novels. Mm-hmm. Is there any reason that the newspaper business in general kind of attracted you?
I guess they're part of some part of my brain that liked the fact gathering part of it, that sort of analytical part, and I think really the thing that was exciting to me was just picking up the newspaper, and every day it was something different. It was exciting, just to feel it in my hands. That may be going away with the internet. I hope it doesn't. But that really attracted me. I've actually tried to write a couple novels. Nice. I've had and that's a really tough racket.
Yeah. So you like the going to the games and watching them and just really being able to write something that you don't have to create.
Yeah, in a sense, but that's really, I think that's a little misleading because you can't just sit there and watch the game and write about what you see. I mean, I think a good columnist is also a good reporter, and you have to go and talk to people. I mean, you have to go interview the people who are involved. I can have all the opinions I want, but if they're not informed opinions, then I'm really no different than anybody who sits at home and writes their own blog. So we have access that other people don't. The access to locker room, to coaches, that sort of thing.
Is there any reason why you pick sports? You said you played sports.
I did. I played baseball growing up. I played basketball in high school. I always loved sports, and I don't know when I never covered it in college or my first 6 months of my first job, and I don't know why that was. I was kind of resistant to the idea. I don't know if I felt like you weren't a real reporter unless you were covering city hall meetings or whatever. But once I got into it, I realized I was home. You know, it felt like I was like, what was I thinking? Why wasn't I doing this all along?
When you do write, you are a columnist, so you don't just, write the Bears won, the Cubs won, the Sox lost.
I write the Bears stink or the Bears were good. Yeah, I mean, that's they pay me for my opinions. So.
Do you ever feel it's tough to formulate an opinion?
Sure, and you wake up in the morning. I write 4 times a week, and some days you wake up and you don't have any idea what you're going to write about. You get to the afternoon, you don't know what you're going to write about. That's tough. We're lucky in this town that there's so many different sports teams and there's so many different things going on that it's rare that you don't have an idea. But you go to a Bears game, and let's say it's a Monday night game, I've got to have an opinion on deadline. That's a challenge. Now I've done it. I've been doing this. I've been in this business for more than 25 years, so I'm used to it. But it can be a little daunting. It's one thing to be able to write what you see. It's another to have an opinion on deadline that makes at least some sense.
I'm guessing you are what fans are you? What teams do you like?
Well, really, as a columnist, I step back from all that, and I can't be a fan of any team. I'm supposed to be as objective as I can about the teams. Now, I'll root for certain columns. I'm not rooting for the team, but if I see that the Sox winning the World Series, that's a great story. That was the best story of my life. So I was able to experience something no columnist in Chicago had experienced for 86 years when they won it, or if the Cubs won it after 102 years, that would be amazing. So I don't look at it that way, and it's a little sad in a way because I think when you're a sports writer and you're immersed in this, you lose that little kid's enthusiasm inside about the teams you might have loved in the past, and so it kind of gets slapped out of you a little bit by just doing the job all the time. I love going to the games. I love covering it, but it's not like that for me anymore.
So is it kind of hard to watch a game and then not write about it? Like every time you're watching a game, are you saying, "Oh, I really forming an opinion in your head," or can you still watch it just for the love of the game?
Yeah, I can do that.
You can.
And it helps having 2 high school boys, I think, and growing up, watching them grow up, and sitting watching games with them, and it's enjoyable that way for me. For the longest time, I didn't go to games for any other reason than to cover them. So that's been really kind of neat for me.
So is there any sport in particular that you like writing about?
Boy, really when I get there, I love covering Bears games because it's like a big event once a week. It's like a mini war where baseball you have games every single day.
All right. Wait, just a quick question. You write almost specifically about Chicago sports, right?
Yeah, for the most part. But I was going to say to you, I love. They'll send me to the Super Bowl if the Bears aren't there. I'm going to go to the Olympics in Vancouver. I've been to 5 other Olympic games. I love doing that because there's great stories. I go to the Masters golf tournament either every year or every other year. And people say, well, that's kind of boring, golf, but it's fun to write about. So I can generally get enthused about most anything, as long as they're good stories to tell. That's all I really care about.
When you get sent around to like the Masters or the soon-to-be Vancouver Olympics, does that change the way you're writing because it's not like a home team?
I would say when I go to the Olympics, for example, there's usually a lot of human interest stories there. You'll find somebody who's overcome some incredible obstacles to get to the point where they are. So that's neat. But I can remember I went to the Olympics in Turin, Italy, the last Winter Olympics, and I remember there was a snowboarder who was about to win the race. I don't know what that race is. There's 4 other snowboarders are going toward the finish line. And he gets to the final hill and he does some hot dog thing, where he does some kind of flip crazy thing, showboating, and falls and loses. And so I was very critical of that person, that snowboarder, because I thought you just blew the gold medal. You just blew a gold medal. So I approach it the same way. If I think there's something compelling or I have a strong opinion about something at the Masters. If I think, whatever, Phil Mickelson behaved badly or something,
Right.
I'll write that. So that's, if I have an opinion, I'm going to write it.
Right. It seems that when you, being an opinion writer, that certain people won't like your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, is that a hard thing to deal with, knowing that like you're going to write, oh, I hated this play, and you knowing that that guy will probably read it because you're a big writer and he'll...
Right. Sometimes it's, you know that going in. But my responsibility is not to that athlete or
Right.
that coach or that team. My responsibility is telling the truth, or what I perceive as the truth, to the readers. Now, there are a lot of readers who won't agree with what I say
Right.
either, and I'll get a ton of emails about things. But that's just the way it is. You develop a thick skin about criticism, and I always feel like if I'm critical of an athlete and he has a problem with me, we'll talk. I'll see him the next day or a day after that and work it out.
Have you ever been contacted by an athlete?
Yeah, I've had I had a big problem with Sammy Sosa once, where I'd written a column saying, in the middle of all the rumors about steroids while he was with the Cubs, I wrote, if I were him and I were innocent, I'd go and take a drug test on my own. I'd go do it on my own and show people the evidence. So I see him in the clubhouse the next day, and he says, you wrote that I took steroids. And I said, no, I didn't write that. I said, if I were you, and if I were in this position where I was being accused, or there was all these innuendos about me, this is what I would do. And he said, you said I took steroids. I said, did you read the column? And he said, no. He said, but somebody had told him. I said, read the column, and then we'll discuss it from there. So it's those sort of things. And but he didn't have a lot of use for me, and I didn't have a lot of use for them or him, and it really didn't matter anyway. So,
Does, say somebody contacted you and they continue to play that way, would you ever attack a person? Not attack, I'm sorry to say that.
I'm not sure, like who, an athlete?
Yes.
If
like an athlete is having running problems, or like, continuing problems, and you address that, do you think you're going to affect how they play? Do you try to help athletes out?
again, that's kind of not my job.
Right.
If I feel, I know I've written columns where I feel like an athlete's been unfairly treated, or I'll say, hey, put yourself in this guy's shoes. He's got an incredible amount of pressure on him. Can't we let up a little bit? I've done that. But you know what? This is a big town, and these guys are big boys, and I think they understand what the deal is here.
Right. You said earlier that you like to work at go to the Bears games.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any personal team that you like rooting for that's not a Chicago team?
I got to tell you, no. I'm really. I know it sounds awful, but
Right.
it's just not like that. I mean, you're. The enjoyment I get is RB Sports.
Yes.
That's it's because that's personal to me, and I enjoy watching kids play and that sort of thing because my kids are involved, but I don't have any rooting interest in other teams. It is sad in a way. I just don't, but I don't look at it that way, and frankly, I don't know. There's probably not many other sports writers who are like that. Mark Gonzalez, who covers the White Sox for the Tribune,
Mm-hmm.
is a huge USC football fan.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's an example. And I know Joe Colley, from the White Sox writer for the Sun-Times, is a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So it is possible. Maybe
Right.
I'm the strange one. I don't know.
Is it hard to watch like RB Sports and sports that you're not supposed to be covering and not really right in your head?
No. Not at all, and I also don't look at it like, boy, this is so much lower level than I'm used to covering.
Right.
Because when you're in it and you're watching it, it's really exciting. If it's an exciting basketball game, and the place is going crazy, that's a lot of fun to me. And I see kids who are trying really hard and talented kids, and I'm not thinking about how would I write this. I'm
Right.
thinking, I hope RB wins this game.
Have you ever covered an RB story for the paper?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. And you know what? I'll interrupt you. I wouldn't either. With my two boys in here, I wouldn't. that'd be a conflict. I couldn't write objectively about that. So,
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Morrissey.
thanks for having me.